And this is Lucas.
And this is Thanks for Playing,
the podcast where we break down the most iconic video games the world has to offer.
Ho!
Woo!
You know, there's something to be said that we've been doing that intro, truly doing it pretty much weekly for 3 years now.
I know. How do we even land on it? I don't
know.
even know how we landed on that intro.
Neither do I, honestly. I think other podcasts would have just made a recording and just set it aside and be done with it, but not us.
I've said this before, and this is like my big advice to people making podcasts is keep the intro the same all the time, every single time. Because the reason we listen to podcasts is to feel comforted every week by the voices of the people that we love.
Yes, sir.
Right? And your intros help people with a feeling of familiarity every time they hit play.
Yes, sir.
So that was always one big thing. I remember telling you that like at the very beginning of this whole project. We got to keep this thing consistent, man.
And I guess I'll just reflect a little bit because we're at the end of the year here as well. This is our end of the year episode.
Yeah.
3 years just about now we've been doing this. No, 3.5.
3.5. We started in middle of 2020.
That is nutty.
I know.
Truly nutty. So
seriously insane.
Shout out to us and, shout out to the other creators that continue to persist. It's fun.
Yeah. Hey, and shout out to our team at the end of the day, too.
Shout out to our
Mickey
team.
Always jumping in and High Lead and Chambers. I mean, when we started, I didn't think we would have a website or a TikTok with some virality, and the Twitch followers and the YouTube subs, and it's been really fun. And the Discord, most of all, is like a daily dose of dopamine for me.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, big ups to everyone that's contributed. We've really picked that up the past year, just getting a bunch of other people involved, and it's been pretty sick. But enough of the love fest. We're not here about that. We're here to talk video games, baby. Real quick off the top, I just want to give a quick, acknowledgement. We did actually just acknowledge this in the previous week's episode, but I do also want to give a mention of it here as well, since this is their game we're talking about here. As of this recording, when we're recording this today on the 18th, we did unfortunately get news today that James McCaffrey did unfortunately pass away today due to cancer at the young age of 65. So thoughts and prayers to his family. James was incredible. He did an incredible job in this game. And I know he also voiced the titular Max Payne in the Max Payne games. So thoughts and prayers go out to family and
very,
friends
very
and
sad.
Everyone that was ever involved in his life. And thank you for everything you provided to us, and rest in peace, James. So in case that spoils anything, today, everyone, we are talking about the number one horror author simulator, Alan Wake 2. Can you tell I forgot to write one?
Yeah, you're good. That's I got you. The third-person action-adventure horror mystery game by Remedy, Alan Wake 2. A sequel 13 years in the making.
Kind of crazy.
If you can believe it.
I waited 13 years for Kingdom Hearts 3, which, by the way, everyone, I am streaming on YouTube. Catch me live on Tuesdays. And real quick, I guess before we dive into the rest of it, as always, you can find us online at TikTok, Twitter, and Instagram at CFP Podcast. That is at CFP Podcast, then S at the end. And of course, as well, you can shoot us an email to thanksforplayingpod@gmail.com. Or if you go to our website, thanksforplaying.live, you can find a link to all of our socials, our YouTube, where we're posting a lot more now and streaming, as well as a Twitch and Kick. You can also find links to our Discord. Or if you go to the link tree of any of our social media handles, you can also find a link to our Discord. Coming out, it's a good time. Obviously, we're raving about it. It's a really great place to hang out, talk games, just a fun group of folks, and kind of just have fun and respectfully shit on each other's opinions, and it's a good time.
Absolutely.
So real quick, this game, obviously, Alan Wake 1 came out 13 years ago, so I'd like to give just a quick, brief synopsis of this game for everyone that maybe isn't too familiar with what Alan Wake 2 is. So Alan Wake 2, shocker, continues the story of Alan Wake, a man with the power to write stories into reality, but currently trapped in the dark place, a hellish alternate reality. The game introduces a new lead, Saga Anderson, an FBI agent sent to explore a gruesome murder by the Cult of the Tree in Bright Falls, Washington, the setting for the first game. The game switches perspectives between Alan and Saga, allowing you to experience the story through both of their eyes as Alan attempts to escape the dark place, help his wife, and stop Scratch, the demonic entity born from the dark place, while Saga tries to figure out what's going on with the cult of the tree, the mystery around Alan, who's showing up in visions for her, and all the paranormal activities happening in Bright Falls.
Okay. Honestly, it's going to get a lot more convoluted from here when we talk about story and world, because that's a nice little setup, but holy shit, the game story can be confusing.
A little bit.
I think fair to say.
A little bit. Before we dive fully into the game, I want to talk a bit about Remedy, Lucas. What's GameScoop kind of we were talking about them when Alan Wake 2 was coming out, and they mentioned how they were putting Remedy up there with like Insomniac, Naughty Dog, Santa Monica Studio, as far as like being able to really craft like these single player focused games with these narrative driven experiences. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, so Remedy, for those of you that don't know, Alan Wake, Control, Max Payne, Alan Wake's American Nightmare, and now Alan Wake 2 as well. Honestly, I get the they're a premier developer. They make some really, really great content. They have some amazing games out there. They definitely have a very honed in style, and definitely have really honed in inspiration. Mostly things like Twin Peaks, X-Files, True Detective, a lot of mystery, a lot of what I've referred to as Pacific Northwest core. That's kind of like at the core of the Remedy Entertainment style guide. So I do like the comparison overall. I think calling them Insomniac is probably a little bit inaccurate, because Insomniac is really good at making kind of straight ahead AAA games, whereas Remedy is definitely way more unique. They're not American, and which is funny because all their games pretty much feel very have that American weird sense about them. Especially even Control was taking place at a American federal bureaucracy building. Like the FBI, and the FBI is obviously heavily involved in Alan Wake. It takes place in New York. It takes place in the Pacific Northwest. It's very American.
Yes.
And also has very American sensibilities, like the liberal uses of guns in all of the games. Although a lot of games use guns that are not American developed. But just a proclivity for like violence and weirdness that I think Americans are into when it comes to like Pacific Northwest style forests, trees, murders, and ritualistic sacrifices and things like that. We love that stuff.
We do.
So Remedy is kind of interesting because they have like a really clear style guide, and the style guide is not their country of origin, right? And it's like, and they do such a good job of really like riding that line where there's a lot of really great kind of Swedish Nordic inspiration and names and characters throughout all of Alan Wake 2 and Control. But it is like a very honed in genre, I guess I should say. So like I said, we've played Alan Wake 1. We did an Alan Wake episode for the podcast a couple years ago. We also did Control last year. And I really enjoyed Alan Wake. I think parts of the game didn't age very well. Control kicks ass. I think Control's super underrated, and I think it's one of my favorite games. Like, it's on my top 20 short list for sure of games, period. And we're here today to talk about Alan Wake 2. What are your thoughts? Are you a Remedy guy?
I think I am. I really enjoyed Alan Wake 1. And we're going to get into a little bit why, because part of the things I enjoyed about Alan Wake are actually absent from Alan Wake 2, which is a bit of a bummer. And Control's actually one I want to go back and replay, especially after having played Alan Wake 2. But those are the only ones I've played. But I think overall, just like I'm pretty up on Remedy. There's not a lot of other gaming developers and companies doing things the way they do as far as how they choose to tell their stories and how they choose to mix media in the way they do, and kind of like the cuts they do within their games and like the way they integrate it. And I will get into it. I think some of that actually hurts it a little bit in this game, but I'm fucking glad they're doing it. I really am, because I think when it lands, it really lands. And if we didn't have companies doing anything like this, we would just keep getting Spider-Man 2 every year or God of War Ragnarok every year. Fine games in their own
Whoa,
right.
stray bullet.
Straight bullets for high lit. Good games, but like games that I would say don't do anything particularly interesting or like are particularly trying to push the medium anymore, you know. And it really kind of, you know, when I was playing this game, I couldn't help but think about what Kojima was talking about, how like they're almost making a new form of media with what he wants to do with his new game he talked about called OD. And that's kind of what I felt like in some certain aspects Alan Wake was, just with how mixed the media was, I guess, in this game, and kind of how weird it was and how funky it was. You know, I'm super excited to see what they do. They're very clearly, I mean, it was more prevalent in this game than ever, especially with all the crossovers between this game and Control. But they're very clearly building some type of Remedy universe.
I'm all in on the Remedy universe for sure.
I have a feeling over the next, like, you know, I think especially with the success of this game and all the attention it got after the Game Awards, you know, I think they're going to be pumping out more than ever. You know, obviously we had a 13-year wait between this and Alan Wake. I'm sure now we can probably expect, if they're whatever the next,
a shorter time frame for the turnaround
for all their future games, whether that's Alan Wake 3, Control 2, whatever they do, you know.
Yeah, Control 2 has been announced. So,
yes. Yeah, so
yes,
I'm excited for that one when that comes out. And yeah, I think this is super. I think Sam Lake is a super funny guy. He just seems like a super interesting character. I'm glad he's representing, you know, a company. I think he seems well. Hopefully that doesn't come back to burn me in 2 years. But I'm up on Remedy for sure, and I'm excited to kind of dive into Alan Wake a bit here. But enough about that, Lucas. I want to dive more in just to the game itself. What were your general impressions so far?
Yeah, so good question, Matthew. Initial thoughts. You know, I enjoyed this game. I thought the game was pretty cool. I would have loved to play it in October. I think we mistimed this one a little bit. I think it would have been a really great kind of horror October type game. Although I didn't think it was as scary as you did, I don't think. I actually don't even think this was the scariest game this year. I mean, Dead Space got remade. Resident Evil 4 got remade. We played Resident Evil 8 this year for the pod. This was like far from the scariest game that I actually did consume this year. But it, you know, it's horror. You know, it's kind of its own fun brand of horror with the Remedy tone, which it has actually like a lot of humor in it. It really reminds me of David Lynch's tone in Twin Peaks quite a bit, where there's a lot of like melodrama. Some of the characters are really overacting on purpose. Some characters are really out of place in a really funny way. So there's a lot of really cool stuff there. You know, there was really interesting mechanics like the Mind Place in this, which is basically a detective board style room where you connect the dots for cases and discover clues. There's profiling, aka like intuition, that you use in this game in that Mind Place, which helps you deduce facts, find the right questions for people. It was really cool to see like a very, very solid graphical update from Alan Wake 1. And even Control. 13 years
later, I would hope
13 years later, yeah. Well, it's funny, and then you go back and just look at Alan Wake 1, and it's like, man, like it's just funny to see like the difference in where it went, you know, because they're both going for realism too. So it's not like you're comparing the same kind of general art style and goal there.
Yeah.
And also like this, I feel like this game had some really cool things about it in terms of like the mystery specific part of the genre, where it was really leaning heavily into finding clues, discovering places, exploring areas, and trying to deduce what to do next. The puzzle parts of this game I thought were also really great. I made a note here. I enjoyed just finding a puzzle, like a cache in the forest, and dissecting that puzzle. I thought it was awesome. There was really, really interesting ones. They were sometimes look around the environment type of puzzles, and sometimes they were like riddles. And honestly, loved them very much. So I really want to shout out Remedy for being very clever and coming up with some really, really cool stuff there. I think, and we'll go into this way more, the biggest weakness of the game for me is actually the gameplay itself. The fighting, are you good? Can you hear me? What? I don't. Sorry, you're like you're
scratching.
Sorry. Oh, okay. I thought you were signaling at me.
No,
shut up.
Good, bro.
Okay. We'll cut this out. The gameplay to me was the weakest part, and by gameplay I mean like the gameplay loop of fighting enemies, of like shooting at people and healing, and just the general stuff that you expect from a third-person horror game, right? This is by far the weakest like third-person survival horror mechanically that I can think of. Dead Space, even the Dead Space original one that we played, like the remaster of a few years ago, mechanically had way more depth, way more interesting like weapons and like enemy variety and stuff. This game is way behind when it comes to that kind of stuff. Basically, every single enemy you fight, you shine a flashlight on them and you just shoot them as much as you can until they die. They all look the same. And they all basically play the same. There's maybe a little bit of variety when you fight like a heavy or the occasional boss, which there's really not a lot of bosses. I understand the flashlight mechanic from the original Alan Wake 1 was crucial to the actual story in that game. And also, for those that don't know, Alan Wake 1 was really trying to show off the lighting capabilities of the Xbox 360. So they really heavily leaned into the way lighting worked in that game. Duracell batteries even played like a role in Alan Wake 1. I don't know if you remember, Matt, but there was like straight up Duracell advertisements for the batteries that you put into your flashlight. So not to like shit on kind of the source material or like kind of the original intention, but like to be clear, like there is like a product integrated thing in the original Alan Wake 1 when it came to the reason why lighting plays such a big role in that game. Like there is a little bit of like the product and the like capabilities of the Xbox 360 did play a role in developing the mechanics of what the flashlight is, how you use it to fight enemies. And I just think that in Alan Wake 2, it's kind of not interesting. Shining a light on people just became cumbersome, not fun, not interesting. There's no variety in how you do it. There's no such thing as like, basically like it's an additional resource, but it's never really used in any sort of like difficult way. It never scales the right way. I'm not sure if you ever felt that, Matt, but we could go into it more in game design. But those are some of my initial thoughts right there. And I know we're going to talk about story and world, so I'm going to hold off. But initial thoughts, Matthew, what you think?
In some ways, it kind of reminds me of God of War Ragnarok in the sense that like it starts super strong. I was super intrigued with everything going on, like with Nightingale coming out, like the flashes, the scary flashes, whatever. And it really kind of built this sense of like mystery around the game. And I very quickly noticed too, as well, that this game was very clearly, because I knew they were I knew they were going for more survival horror elements, but I was still hoping within that we were still going to have a lot of the trademark comedy from the first game. One of my favorite parts of the first game, Alan Wake 1, was just how ridiculous some of the lines these characters said were. And it's not just like the overacting like you were talking about, like they were still overacting in this game, but it was just like I think that my favorite part was just the lines from the Taken. Some lines from the first game, the first Alan Wake. Let me read these out for you.
Yeah.
And this would just be random shit Taken would yell as they come at you. Omega-3 fatty acids are good for your heart. I never touch mayonnaise. Always wear a helmet. Look both ways before crossing the street. You get 2 pills in the morning and you'll be nice and calm all day long. And there is just so many like random like little things like that. But one, it was funny. But two, I also enjoyed it because I also felt like it was informing me a little bit about that person that was taken. Because the way I took those was that probably is like, the person that is talking about, I never touch mayonnaise. They're probably like maybe a crazy dieter, or the person that is saying, fatty acids are good for your heart. Maybe they're super into nutrition and fitness, whatever, things like that. That's how I personally took that and like kind of tied it into the game. Whereas, I didn't notice that in this game at all. And if it was there or whatever they were saying, it wasn't like nearly as memorable as some of these crazy stuff in the first game. So I was a little disappointed they strayed from that. And maybe I'm just a little tired of survival horror after playing
like
Last of
3.
Us.
Yeah.
Some of the best ones in the to ever do it, right? Last of Us remake. And then as well with, we played RE8 very recently as well. So maybe I'm just a little jaded out from survival horror. But I think what made the first game so special was its quirkiness and funniness in that way. And I was disappointed not to see it here. Like I said, though, starts super strong. And pretty immediately, though, I kind of picked up on what you were saying as well, that the combat was just noticeably not that interesting. But I did notice as well that I also, obviously a lot of games emphasize how well they can do lighting and stuff now. And to your point, the first game was like a demonstration of what the 360 could do. They didn't necessarily need or want to do that here, but I was still very impressed with how the game looked just from like a lighting perspective. Obviously they're going to make a big focus on that, and it was very well done.
Most of the time, there were some times where they were doing a little bit too much, in my opinion. Like they were dialing up a little bit too much with some of the lighting effects and whatnot.
Yeah. Oh, and just the mixed media too. Like that kind of starts right away in the game.
I love that, and can't say enough good stuff about that.
Not a lot of games do that these days, I don't think. And that's not even just like, talking like real life mixed, like live action media put into games. Like there's other ways you could do that too. There was an indie developer we were talking to for a bit that we were thinking about having on the podcast that didn't work out, but their game was really interesting to me because it was a mixed media with like different, just like styles, like animation and like patchwork kind of stuff,
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. I think that's kind of maybe like the next stage for the medium, introducing more of that. So like I said, love that in this game. I'm very excited to see what Mr. Kojima does. And Poole, right? What's his last name?
Yeah, Jordan Poole.
Jordan Poole does with
wait, Jordan Poole. Jordan Peele. Jordan Poole is a basketball player that fell earlier today.
Jordan Peele. See what they do with OD, whatever that is. Random side note, I did not realize OD, what they showed of that. I did not realize that was Unreal 5. I thought it was
that was nuts.
Insane.
I knew that they were doing some sort of manipulation because the actors are, the subject's eyes in that OD trailer. You couldn't see like a camera reflection in it or lighting reflection, which is normally you see like even my eyes right now, you can see my ring light right here when you're looking.
Yeah.
That's normally what you see when they do close-up stuff on subjects, but you weren't seeing that in the OD trailer. So I just thought that they were real people, that they edited the eyes out. Like they edited the eyes to make it so you couldn't see that, but very interesting. I want to jump into story and world here, if you're cool with that.
Let's start.
So I'll jump in. I wrote a lot here actually, because I actually had a lot to say about this. So number one word, convoluted. The story was very convoluted. And look, I really enjoyed the first 13 to 15 hours of the story as it turned, as it twisted. But man, when you're hitting that third act, it's a serious slump. I think the game uses a lot of its cool stuff. I think it loses a lot of its flair. I'm thinking about this in terms of like, if I were to watch an Alan Wake TV show or even like a movie or something like that, like if that TV show is like more than like, let's say you got 10 episodes or something like that, those 10 episodes are going to be bangers, right? But if you stretch it to 15 episodes and you get to that 16-hour, 18-hour mark of content, it starts really feeling repetitive, right? And like, I felt like I really ran out of steam during that third act as, we just kept switching realities. The truth gets revealed about Scratch and the time loop. I was just very uninterested at that point near the end. I actually think Twin Peaks is a really, really good comparison because it's very similar with that TV show, which is ironic because that's what this game is pulling a lot of inspiration from, where there's a point and everybody hits it when they're watching Twin Peaks. In season 2, once the big reveal happens, there's still like 10 episodes left of the season, and everyone hates those 10 episodes and most people stop watching it. Yeah. So like, and it's understandable, right? So I think that this game could have been a little bit shorter, and it would have been a lot better. I think the mystery is very intriguing. I loved the meta wall breaking stuff, like the Sam Lake, like, so Alex Casey, everyone's played by a live actor counterpart. So you have all the video game characters, and then they have a live actor counterpart who's kind of playing like in that mixed media space. And Alex Casey's live action counterpart is Sam Lake. So that's sick. Like there's a point in the story where you are watching a live action TV show appearance of Alan Wake, who wrote a story about Alex Casey, who's a character detective in Alan Wake stories. But that character, Alex Casey, is existing in real life as Sam Lake on the couch with him during the talk show. So there's this like cool like loop thing that they do where Alan Wake is here talking about a character he created and he's on the show, but really Sam Lake is the actor playing a character and Sam Lake is the one that actually created Alan Wake. Okay? That's cool. I dug that. As soon as I saw that was happening, I was into it. But then again, that's like hour 3 of the game. You still got about 15 more hours of stuff like that to go through. And also, the actor that played Alan Wake, that was not his voice, because obviously Alan Wake.
They're Finnish.
Yeah, exactly.
Finland,
so
yeah.
There's 2 people playing Alan Wake. There's the voice actor for Alan Wake and then the actor for Alan Wake. And I don't think they nailed that ADR as best as they could have.
Dude, I thought the same thing.
Dude, yeah, they fucked it up sometimes. And it was so...
Sorry. Yeah.
Go ahead. No, what were you going to say?
I don't know if it got better as the story went on or not, but I didn't notice it as much as the game went on. But that very first scene when he goes into the talk show where it's like an extended scene with him, I was like, oof, that is
it was
pretty
rough.
Bad. It was
and I don't know if it's us because we've done ADR and we've produced like stuff like that in the past, but to me, it was a little bit noticeable and it's a little off-putting.
Honestly, like a year and a half ago, before we did like all the film, I probably wouldn't even know what was going on. But like now that I know to look for, I'm like, oh, that is really bad ADR.
Yeah, that was rough.
So I guess if you and AD Lucas, how about you explain the ADR for the folks that might not know?
Basically, in any live-action filmed piece of content, 80% of what you're seeing the actors say on screen is actually recorded months after the fact, sometimes years after the fact, and it's called ADR, dialogue replacement. So, like, if you watch Brad Pitt in a movie, every line that you're hearing, 80 to 90% of it, probably more, was recorded in a studio weeks, months, years later. It's a normal practice. It happens all the time. And it's because you just never really get really great on-set sound. And there's wind and there's other elements and all that stuff. It's very, very, very tricky. Like, almost like you don't even really realize how hard it is to nail the performance that you had on set to the performance in the studio. It's very difficult. And in the case of Alan Wake, the reason is because the reason they had to do it this way is because there's an original Alan Wake voice actor from a long time ago when they made the first game, and he's got to play Alan Wake now. So they got to keep the same voice actor, but then they need to do all this live action stuff. And turns out the voice actor for Alan Wake doesn't look anything like Alan Wake. So they had to kind of go through and make it a little bit retroactive.
Totally different face model for Alan Wake from the voice actor.
Yeah. So they had a problem to solve, and they had to. So they solved it. It's just the ADR just doesn't line up very well. The performance doesn't exactly match. My last note here: multiverses, alternate realities. I'm done with them, Matt. Officially, we got to move on. We got to move on from this as a story mechanic. I'm so over multiple realities. I'm very over multiverses, alternate universes. Forget it. Count me out. Like, I just need something. I need something else to drive a story. And like, even just, I feel like the stakes always get lower when you move into the other reality and you leave the other one behind. And then there's always this nagging feeling of like, okay, I guess the other thing's supposed to be happening at the exact same time, but it just ruins the workflow of what I'm feeling. It kind of like cuts the story right down the middle in this case, which I don't dig that much. And we need to find other mechanics, bro. We need to find other things.
Yeah, I think with how obviously not saturated, that might be a little unfair to it, but how often we just see it in stories these days, it's it's the trendy thing to do right now. In the same way that, we were getting like a million zombie apocalypse movies in the early 2010s, right? To late 2000s. Now we're getting a bunch of alternate realities.
And to be fair, in the case of Alan Wake 2, it's really just 2 realities. Well, it's like 2 realities simultaneously being rewritten. Yeah. So it's like multiple layered realities, whatever. It's still multiple realities, right? It's not terrible. Mechanically, it's only 2. But yeah, I'm getting a little checked out on this kind of stuff. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Story World? I talked a lot, so go for it.
Yeah. I had the exact same first thing written. It was just convoluted. I had to like literally read the plot afterwards to really fully grasp what I felt like. But they get so wonky with the, like I said, I think the game starts strong because it's also pretty much just starting as like a before it hits the time loop stuff or the time spiral stuff, right?
Yeah,
Like
spiral. It's a spiral.
It's a spiral.
Yeah.
I was actually kind of, random thing aside, I was disappointed that that's how they ended the game, because like from Alan Wake 1, like it's not a lake,
it's an ocean.
That's hard as fuck. That's a really sick line, I thought. Especially like all the mystery it sets up, right? The way this is described, and I get that it goes into its new game plus mode where like there's a new ending and stuff, but it's a lake. It's not a time loop. It's a spiral. It just felt a little lame to me personally.
It's like they tried to run the same play again.
Yeah, and I was a little disappointed in that. Yeah. Even if it does make sense to the plot, I was like, that's fine, I guess. But yeah, I think it's kind of what you were saying. Like the story starts really interesting because it kind of starts off as like a very interesting detective story where supernatural stuff is happening. You want to see what's going on, and you're getting all this information about how is Alan getting out of the dark place, how is this coinciding with what's going on, and then you kind of start thinking, oh, did Alan really even get out of the dark place? Is this Scratch? Is something else happening? And then you have everything with Saga Anderson, all the little stuff going on around the city that's like, oh, why does everyone know her? Why does everyone seem to remember a different life from her? And it's very interesting to see how that gets revealed. And then it just turns into a very weird, like, alternate reality time loop situation that in some ways almost reminded me of like the time loop from Oxenfree 1, because in the Oxenfree 1 it's the same thing. Like you find out, well, it's a spiral. Yeah. They find out it's a time loop, right? Like the events are repeating themselves. And then in Oxenfree 1, you can find ways to help yourself from like your previous playthroughs, the new game plus, to get the proper ending. And it's a similar thing too in this game where like, the other Alans like jumping in or whatever and things like that. But it got just so weird. And I think a lot of times too, I think the game is, I kind of mentioned this at the beginning, I think the story gets a little too weird sometimes, and I feel like it's being weird for the sake of being weird, as well too, just with the sheer amount of like, not the mixed media is the issue, but the sheer amount that will do like these random like cuts in a scene of like Alan screaming or someone else, right? Like, yeah, that's overdone a bit for me to where it just kind of makes the story almost hard to follow. And I'm like, am I supposed to be like paying attention to these random like flashes? Are these actually important, or should I be paying attention to the nonsensical dialogue from Alan about the dark place? Yeah. And as well too, I kind of in the beginning, obviously it develops, but in the beginning too of Alan's missions, I got pretty tired of his, I guess this kind of goes into gameplay, but of his beginning story in the dark place, where it's just
in the studio.
I liked the studio, but like when it would get to like, oh, now I need to go find a new murder site, and there was I felt like it wasn't really moving anywhere from that, but barring the little bits of getting into the apartment where you learn more about Alice. That said, though, some of the murder sites were pretty cool. I particularly enjoyed the ballroom stuff at the.
That was cool.
Appreciated was that the hotel? That was the hotel. Yeah.
The Ocean View Hotel or something like that.
There's the Ocean View Motel, if you recall, in Control.
Yep, from Control. Iconic.
But yeah, just very convoluted, and like I think you nailed it on the head in the same way that Twin Peaks falls off pretty quickly. Like once we get the big reveal here, it's the same thing, and it's a bit of a bummer. There were a couple things I did like. I did like kind of the reveal about how in the beginning you find out the Nightingale you're playing as is actually a Taken, and then the cult.
That's
the reason the cult of the tree exists is actually just to take and
that
protect
was cool.
the city. I enjoyed that. I was kind of glad I called Snatch kind of being, well, at first I thought, Scratch. At first I thought Scratch was a separate entity. I'm like, oh, I bet that's really Scratch, not Alan. And then of course we find out, oh, it's actually just Scratch possessing Alan, whatever.
Right.
And then I really enjoyed all the bits going on in the studio with Mr. Hand, and they also implied that Mr. Hand is kind of like Saga's dad, which I thought was interesting.
Are you talking about Door?
Oh, Mr. Door. I don't know why I said Mr. Hand. Mr. Door. Thank you.
Yeah.
Mr. Door being Saga's dad was implied.
I was like, did I miss it? Mr. Hand?
No.
Yeah.
And then I'm very curious to see what the future holds for Ahti.
Yeah, I like Ati. I love Ati because he was in Control too.
Yeah,
he's really cool. And yeah, I did like all the Control tie-ins a lot. I honestly, like, I find the world of Control. I know they're the same world, but I find that the story of Control and like the overall world building there is so much more interesting than Alan Wake. Like, I'm sorry, like Ati's sick. Like anytime I saw the Federal Bureau of Control stuff, I like perked up and I was like, oh shit, what are they gonna do? How are they involved?
Yeah.
And then when they do get involved at a certain point too, and kind of have a little bit of a bigger role in Alan Wake 2 later in the game, but I think it's so much more of a highlight when the Federal Bureau of Control kind of shows up. It's a good time.
Yeah, they're clearly the movers of the world overall, right?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm excited to see what they do in the future stuff with them. But yeah, overall, just a bit loopy and a bit too convoluted, but had some interesting points for sure.
Yeah. I do want to jump into game design now.
Yes, sir.
So like I said, the combat is just such a weak point for me. And I do want to really double click on the like just like the overall level design through a lot of Alan Wake, which is, if you remember, Matt, like when you're playing as Alan Wake in the Dark Place, kind of the Dark Place reality, a lot of the game level design has to do with like going into an area and like basically just unlocking a door and moving on to the next area. A lot of like backtracking in a lot of ways that are just like not super cool. Like basically you go through a whole level to unlock plot lines as Alan Wake and get ideas for new stories. Then you go back to other locations in order to apply those plot lines to those areas using your mind palace or mind place, whatever. So it's fun like at first because like you're in a subway and it's really interesting. In one area you're like in a hotel and you uncover like this kind of plot line and whatever. Like it can be interesting and it can be kind of fun, but ultimately I just think it's very like on rails. It's very, very like one note straightforward. There's kind of one path you're taking through this whole entire journey. And it's not like, I don't know if I missed this, but you have all these cool plot lines and all these cool scenes. And there's only one answer. So you go to one thing, you do a scene, it doesn't matter. Like you have to pick the right scene. So I'm using like the in-game lingo, so I'm not sure if I'm really nailing it for our audience, but basically there's only one path forward when you're like going through the Alan Wake levels. And I just found that to be pretty uninteresting. Obviously, like I have a huge hang up here on the Alan Wake levels too. You have one gun, you have one weapon the entire time, and then you get a flare gun that you get no ammo for pretty much like the entire game.
Yeah.
And that is super whack because I mean as Saga you get like a crossbow.
Did you get the shotgun with Alan though?
I got I didn't get the shotgun. I missed the shotgun.
There's a shotgun in the hotel. Yeah.
Okay, I missed the shotgun halfway through the Alan parts. I just like the upgrading system was like had to do with finding like words of power or words of stuff or words of items, which are basically hidden like stuff painted on walls that could help you do your upgrades. And I don't know, I just found the upgrading system to just not be all that interesting. Very limiting, not super flexible, and not that like satisfying. I don't know what it was specifically, but like when you got an upgrade, it hardly ever felt like a huge mechanical leap forward or anything like that for either Saga or for Alan.
It wasn't really.
They were like little buffs, and I just feel like the flavor of them was just like a little too cute for me. Like, oh, like Alan goes into his mind palace and like uses a word to. I don't even really know exactly what was happening, but I don't know. I just like wasn't that into the upgrading system, the gun mechanics, and then the enemy variety was pretty much just the same the entire time. And even like some of the boss fights were just like bad, like poorly designed. I did not find like when you fought the brothers, that was super lame. When you fought some heavy,
dark.
It's just too dark. Yeah, like I don't know, like they just didn't hit the like. They just didn't hit the right balance of like visual effects, art style, and like enemy variety in a lot of these things, And like at the end of the day, I know like it's a horror game and you're supposed to not be able to move that fast and you're supposed to be really limited with your movement and you're supposed to feel scared. But to me, I think Alan Wake, like, I mean, if you play like the new Dead Space or you play like the Resident Evil 4 remake, that's like real shit. That's like real third person mechanics when it comes to like fighting stuff. So it was definitely just a super weak point of Alan Wake. I don't want to like fault it because it has a lot of other things going for it, like the mystery mechanics and the mystery components of Alan Wake 2. But just for sure, the combat's the weakest. And it's crazy, Matt. This won Best Game Direction.
Yeah.
This won Best Game Direction at the Game Awards. And after playing this, I formally have to disagree with Best Game Direction here. It's kind of crazy. I get that. I'm getting the narrative thing. I get why it would win Best Game Narrative, but man, like Baldur's Gate 3, Zelda, Mario Wonder, I'm blown away that this beat those when it came to game direction, because the level design in all those games are far outclass this one. The fighting and the combat and the variety far outclasses this one.
Yeah, and just to recap for the audience here real quick, Alan Wake, so I'll go through the list of nominations and what it won real quick. It was nominated for Game of the Year, one Best Game Direction, one Best Narrative, one Art Direction, then was nominated for Best Score and Music, nominated for Audio Design, Melanie Libbard, the actress that played Saga, got nominated for Best Performance.
Mm-hmm.
And then was also nominated for Action Adventure Game, which is weird because it's a horror survival game.
Yeah.
Is there a horror survival? No, they want to get that.
There's not
with it.
No.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I like a lot of what you just said. And I think kind of talking about what I was going earlier, I think relative just to other survival horror stuff, it's just boring. You know, like relative to RE8, relative to
Dead Space,
The Last, and even like I haven't played the new. I'm talking about like the original Dead Space, right? Like relative to that, relative to The Last of Us, it just doesn't really hold a candle to it. Because in The Last of Us, I remember thinking like, okay, I'm gonna think out and plan out. Here's how I'm gonna, like I'd go into a room, I'm like hiding from, I forget their name, the fungus monsters.
The clickers.
The clickers, thank you.
Yeah.
Hiding from the clickers or the other infected. I'd be like, okay, here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna throw this brick to make noise over there. Then I'm gonna assassinate this one. Then I'm gonna use my one crossbow bolt that I have to take out the other one. Like stuff like that. You actually had to be very strategic about how you were gonna approach it. Whereas
different enemies had different weaknesses. Different enemies reacted differently. Yeah.
And whereas you didn't really get that here, and I kind of got pretty sick of, a big thing in Alan Wake's portion of the game is when you're playing as him, throughout the dark place, it's just there's shadows everywhere, and some of these shadows are enemies, some of them are not. And it was kind of boring because you just didn't really find out till you walked right through them. You could sometimes see they'd be like kind of like dashing towards you, a bit more obvious than the other ones, but like it was a very just kind of, I don't know, like in the beginning it kind of worked where I was like, oh, there's a lot of shadows. Yeah. And then at the end of it, I was like, I'm just going to run through this until one of them.
Yeah. It becomes nothing. And you're just like, you're just annoyed at a certain point. You're just like, it's not scary. It loses its luster. Yeah.
So I kind of got tired of that. Let's see. Oops, scroll down here. Give me one moment. I actually did not care for the case board stuff or the plot board like at all. The plot board, really? Well, let me backpedal a little bit.
I think it has its weaknesses for sure.
The case board, I did not at all, with Saga specifically, I did not at all feel like any kind of detective or like I was being like clever or like like deducting anything or deducing anything myself. I was just like, all right, like, yeah, this goes here. This goes here. And to me, it felt like a really drawn out way to try and make a game mechanic out of exposition. And it was just a little overdone, and I understand that like her mind place kind of becomes like a plot mechanic later, obviously, like with I think one of the old guys her uncles.
Yeah, you start actually the mind place actually becomes a psychic zone. Essentially.
But in the beginning, at the very least, like for a large portion of the game, it's just like pretty uninteresting. And like, it's like, oh, you have to profile this person. You're not profiling. You're just like, click X to get more info, basically, right?
Yeah, you're right.
And I don't know, and especially too, like, even if you are trying to be very like detective about it, right, and really trying to think, oh, this piece of evidence goes with this post-it note or whatever. At the end of the day, 99% of players, if they just miss one, or if it doesn't click on the first one they guess, they're just gonna start running through until one sticks. You know, like
yeah, that's what I did.
Exactly.
Times.
Yeah. So it's not like the way it was kind of played up. I was hoping something more akin somehow to. To be fair, I don't know how they would have done this, but something that would have at least invoked the feeling of when I'm playing Phoenix Wright, or something that invokes the feeling of when I would piece together a scene in Oberdin, you know?
Yeah,
I didn't get any of that from there, and it was just like, this is just something I have to do to continue.
Dang, yeah, you actually said everything I didn't realize I was not that like wasn't working for me with a lot of that stuff. I think there was like one instance where I actually used the case board after I hit a little bit of a blocker, where I was like, okay, where do I go next? Where should I go to find this particular item? And I did actually use the case board, and it did lead me to something that I needed to do next that I missed. But it happened one time in 18 hours of gameplay, so it wasn't exactly like you're saying where. Like, I'm thinking about Phoenix Wright and Oberdin, where, man, those games are like crushing it. Like every piece of the story is an opportunity to actually have a revelation about who killed who and who did this. What does this piece of evidence mean? Like, yeah.
And even if like you did manage to like get it your first try and guess, it's not like you yourself are learning anything from that. Like Saga like spells it out once you like connect the two, puzzle pieces basically. So
yeah. That's true.
A little bit of a weak point for me. I didn't mind the plot board as much in Alan's mind place equivalent, or his writer's room, whatever you want to call it. I did just get tired of it pretty quickly though, just because a lot of it I just felt like it was just turning into like a backtracking game, which I don't enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
To contrast that with a game like, let's say, like Last of Us, right? Both the remake and the original, those games work and are interesting because they're survival horror, and you're constantly moving through the world and exploring new areas. And new areas means potential new opportunities to be put uneasy, or be put at a sense of uneasiness, or to be uncomfortable. Whereas in Alan Wake, you're constantly just backtracking to new areas. And granted, you're changing those areas sometimes, but more often than not, you only need to change it to one very specific thing, and then you're not going to use the 3 others on there for any other reason.
Yeah,
and it's very clear most of the time what you have to change it to. It's like, I need to put the summoning ritual in wherever.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it would have been cooler if they did a little bit more ambiguity there. And I think that's kind of why I got sick of playing as both of them kind of quick to an extent. But I did, when I wasn't like backtracking, and when I was seeing new areas, I did really enjoy just exploring the stuff. Some of the scenes were very cool, like just walking through like the bloodied hotel when you put like the murder site part on it was really interesting.
Enjoyed that.
But one big knock I do have, and you mentioned this as well, there were a lot of parts in the game where it was just too hard to see, and there's a difference in a game where something's too hard to see versus this is darkness and creating an atmosphere. I think a great example of atmosphere being created with darkness would be, for example, RE8. They do that a lot in like a lot of the dungeons you're in or whatever. Mm-hmm. But it's still like you have visibility where you need it. Whereas in Alan Wake, I'm like, I can't see the person in front of me that's hitting me.
It's like the difference between, like what you said, like mood, narrative, tone versus just like obscurity. Like this is just obscuring my view at a certain point. And like, there was moments, dude, where like the lighting visual effect, like the lens flare, the kind of blaring lights that are kind of coming at you, it's too much. It's just, they just did too much. They pushed it too far is like the way I would say it, because I think it's very stylized and cool for a bit, but then when it's just you're getting beaten over the head with it, it's pretty annoying.
Yeah.
So I very much agree with you on pretty much everything you said. And to be clear, I want to talk about the backtracking one last time too, and then I also want to talk about what you just mentioned about the some of the scenes that you do in the Alan Wake verse as well. Like games that have backtracking in them, normally I actually really enjoy. Like I enjoy like Metroidvanias. Control actually has a ton of backtracking in its level design. The difference is that like, and this is kind of crazy to me because Remedy understands this. Like when you do go back through levels and areas that you've been to on a map, or even in a specific level, it's always great when you come back with like some extra item or knowledge, like knowledge as a player about certain things that you can take with you and kind of conquer the zone in a slightly different way. Maybe you go through this whole zone, and there's a lot of really tall platforms, and then at the end of the zone you get a super jump, and then now you can go back to the beginning of the level and you have a whole new approach to that area of the level. Control does that all the time, right? Alan Wake 2, it's like you're backtracking without that. You don't even usually bring back extra resources or extra guns or anything like that. I missed the gun in the hotel, which makes me sad. But like, why was the gun, missing the gun, even an optional thing? You know, like why couldn't it just be at the very end of the level when you unlock the very last key that you have to take back to the very beginning of the level? Yeah. You know what I mean? Like that would make the game a lot more satisfying to play. That would make the backtracking a whole lot easier to swallow, that is. So there was that. And the other thing too, like I said, is when you're in this universe, in the story, yeah, it's scary to see like the blood all over the wall and the bodies all over the wall. But within the story of that you're playing through, it's made up. So it feels like made up. It feels like the impact is very less. Like it's not hitting me as hard as it would. Like if there was not some sort of reality that you're overwriting kind of mechanic going on in the story, it would just be scary because like, holy shit, somebody came through and murdered everybody in this hotel. Yeah. But that's actually not what happened. You wrote that everybody came through and was murdered in the hotel. So it's like lessening the impact of what actually happened, because what actually happened didn't happen, or what you wrote in there didn't actually happen. So yeah. I just think there's a little bit of a problem there in terms of the stakes, and in terms of like the whole premise of the story in general.
Yeah, and I think just one other thing to hit on too, and obviously this is a different genre from Control, but like just gameplay wise, Control is fucking sick, you know?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
You were basically like a Jedi with a gun, like using force shit, you know, like throwing stuff around,
flying,
levitating, yeah. Whatever. And you know, I'm not saying that needs to be included here. Obviously, like this is not that kind of game, but I guess I'm surprised that they didn't find more creative ways to make this combat more engaging. And, you know, maybe that's just also a point in case that they just need to, you know, evolve the narrative more, in the sense of like evolve the narrative in a way where you introduce enemies where you can introduce cooler abilities, right? Because obviously, like, the Taken or the people in the Shadows and Dark Place, by narratively, all you have to do is shine a light and shoot them, right? They need to introduce a new reason for there to be more cool ways to fight.
Yeah, exactly. Like, why couldn't there be like different types of light or something? Or why couldn't there be like enemies that reacted to light differently? Enemies that,
you know what's a great example of that, actually? And I don't know if I think I've talked about it, but the combat in Hogwarts Legacy is actually very well done.
Yeah, because it's like a rock, paper, scissors match.
Well, they do that, but then they also have like, oh, I need to actually use a red spell now or a yellow spell, right? Depending on what kind of shield people have. And then it forces you to actually like not just be spamming spells, but actually, oh, I need to be paying attention. I need to get creative, you know? I think like what you're saying with the light, they could have done something similar here.
Well, like even like God of War, you have to use different weapons for certain enemies that you're fighting. And like you have to use slightly different things. Like in Alan Wake, it always came down to shine the light, shoot them 6 times, usually 6 times. They're on the floor, reload, do it again. And like the bar, like the resource for your flashlight was so uninteresting, so lame. It was just like shine it. You get like 4 or 5 charges on the flashlight, and then you have to shoot the enemy with a gun. And I don't know. It just there's this. It's pretty outdated combat design for sure. Like objectively.
Yeah, very much, very much.
Let's move to art style though.
Yes.
We talked about it a little bit with the lighting.
Yeah, I mean the lighting obviously it does hinder the gameplay at certain points a little bit, but it's beautiful. I really like the set design overall. I really enjoyed, just like I said, walking through some of like Alan's places or like, you know, the nursing home, just seeing all the intricacies of it, whatever it was. And just the dark place. I mean, especially like when you first leave, Mr. It's not Hand. What is it?
It's Whirling Door.
Why do I keep wanting to say Hand? Is there a Mr. Hand?
Just say the studio. I don't know.
You know what I'm thinking of? There's a Mr. Hand or Hands in Cyberpunk. That's why I keep saying.
Oh, okay.
Mr. Door. I really liked everything. You know, the aesthetics of the studio, the lighting. I loved like neon signs when you get out into the outside, right from the studio. and the mixed media was sick.
Yeah.
And I did think a lot of the designs for the characters were fun until like you see them for the 10th time for the enemies, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I loved the mixed media aspect. Again, I already raved about that. So huge ups to them on that. They are probably one of the only people really doing that in gaming, and definitely the best. So
the best.
Right
I agree with that. Yeah, and I think that's really what set it over the top to get best art direction at the Game Awards as well. Like honestly, I think a lot of the set stuff in Saga's reality to me is pretty boring and pretty derivative as well. I just feel like they copy pasted, aesthetics from, like I said, Twin Peaks, X-Files, The Goonies. Like it's kind of not super original. And Alan Wake 1 too. It's kind of like playing the same card again with like a lot of the aesthetics of Bright Falls and Deer Fest and stuff like that. And like you kind of nailed it right there too. The Taken design is basically is pretty uninspired for me too. Alan Wake's world is amazing. Like Alan Wake's world is really cool. Like the dark take of New York, the subway, the hotel, like the movie theater, like everywhere you go was interesting and cool and like shifting, and like all the different sets and scenes were sick. Like I loved the way they looked for sure. I do think that the lighting could have been probably scaled back a little bit in certain zones to make things a little bit easier to see. I don't know if we're just getting old. And obviously the mixed media is one of the most unique things I've seen in a game. One of my favorite parts is where you first kind of experience it, where you're playing as Alan Wake, or you enter Alan Wake's world when he's in the studio and he's on the couch on the talk show, and then it shifts to gameplay like right after that. And I was pretty floored. I was like, wow, okay, here we go. Yeah. That's cool. And was definitely one of the most unique experiences I've had in gaming this year. Absolutely. So that was really cool. And I do think, as a filmmaker too, I do think that they did a pretty good job on a lot of the live action stuff. They got good performances. I think everything was lit very, very well. Everything except for the ADR for Alan. I think everything was pretty solid in all the live action sequences.
Yeah. Agreed. Hard agree.
Yeah.
All right. Sound design. The music in this game slaps.
It's pretty good.
The music. I was listening to the soundtrack just while I was doing my notes. It's kind of my tradition. I don't know.
Yeah, you do that a lot. That's your thing. Yeah.
Whenever I am doing notes for the game, I always listen to the soundtrack. And honestly, I'm a big music or game soundtrack guy in general. But beside the point, this music is very good. I'm forgetting the name of the main song. Let me look it up right now. Follow You Into the Dark. It's great. Mm-hmm. Very close to the name of that one Death Cab song, also a great song. I loved the music. And I think it's point in case it was nominated for score, right, for Game Awards. You wouldn't know it though, because it got glossed over very quickly at the Game Awards, as well as the sound design.
Yeah,
but true. So whack. Go listen to our Game Awards recap episode.
Yeah.
And I think the actual sound design itself was like the sounds from Taken and stuff and Shadows, despite it being a bit like, overplayed. It's not overplayed, repetitive. It was very well done for what it was. And like the game, it just at the bare minimum, game needs to sound good. We've talked about that a lot. Mm-hmm. This game sounded great. Yeah. And all the voice performances, the ADR obviously was bad. But
that was my only nitpick.
The voice performance itself was fine.
Good. That's really my only nitpick here. I did enjoy the sound design pretty much overall. As with any horror game, like the intensity goes up when like monsters are after you and stuff like that. I don't think it reaches quite the intensity of like a Dead Space, or like we're comparing it a lot to Resident Evil. It doesn't ever really reach the intensity of like an RE game or even like Dead Space, of like when the monster's after you and what the score does. So it's a little bit more tame for me, but I thought it was cool. And just the soundtracks and interludes that play during chapter or in between chapters were little nice breaks. And then the Old Gods of Asgard, very cool. Very cool. The concert part, very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
God, I loved the Herald of Darkness part in the studio. I just kind of like, I didn't even like play at that point. I was just kind of like taking it all in for like 10 minutes. Yeah,
that was cool. NPC award.
I'm gonna go with Ati. I'm glad he kind of got a pretty
I'm
decent
going with
sized
Ati
part
too.
in this, and
Yeah.
I'm just very excited to see. He's like the opposite of Scratch. He's like a friendly, omnipotent being, basically.
Yeah.
I'm very excited to see how he continues to play a part in this universe, because obviously he's being set up to be pretty important. I think he's one of the main connectors of, he plays a decent part in Control, and he plays a pretty decent sized part here as well. So I'm excited to see how that all connects, keeps going.
Yeah. I thought, well, Ati's great, and I think what's really cool too about Ati that's like a great reference point is I mentioned at the beginning how it's cool that like Remedy and Sam Lake are like really leaning. There's like really good inspiration for where they're from, I guess is the best way to say it. Where like, Ati is speaking like another language. He's like clearly has like a Nordic, or what should we how do we say? I know it's Finnish, but what's the name of those countries, Matt, that have all the universal healthcare? Scandinavian, yeah. Like just the Scandinavian stuff, like the old gods of Asgard, and like, the fact that Saga is like kind of descended from her grandparents that show up in the game. And I don't know, I love the influence of stuff like that. And it makes it feel like the story and the world is a lot more personal for Sam Lake and the people over at Remedy in general. So yeah, I just shout out to Ati because I feel like he's really unique in that he is also very personal. I would not be surprised if Ati is based on somebody that Sam Lake actually knows personally. Yeah. So it just feels like it's coming from a very authentic place. And Ati too, in the game world, is really helpful and very cool. Yeah. So I do dig him. Yeah.
I want to replay Control.
Me too.
What did I think I gave that game an 8. I bet I'd like it more now.
Yeah, I think I gave it a higher score than that.
I think you gave it a 9, or no, I didn't give it probably a 9. You probably gave it.
We could check the sheet. I'll check the sheet while we talk about companion piece pick.
I have a feeling we're gonna have very similar companion piece picks. I'm gonna go. So I was gonna go with Twin Peaks, but I went back and I checked my Alan Wake notes, and I had actually done Twin Peaks for that one, so I'll differ a bit here. But I am still sticking with Lynch. Going Mulholland Drive.
Okay, because you just watched that one.
I just watched it.
Yeah.
And it's also very narratively a bit confusing.
Yeah.
Kind of one you have to take a couple looks at to get. Kind of also does not necessarily, depending on your interpretation of the film, it's either alternate realities or dream worlds. But it has a similar thing going on in that. And it also has some scary moments in it too.
Dang, you gave Control a 7.
Did I?
Yeah.
Must have been in a...
You were in a bad mood. Yeah, you was in a bad place.
When did we review that?
November of 21.
I was a pissy little boy about
Yeah, okay, yeah. I gave it an 8, so I probably should have given it a higher score in hindsight.
Dang, I'm surprisingly.
Yeah.
I'll have to replay that. Yeah. That's one of those ones that like it's like me with like Killer 7. The more I think back on it, I'm like, oh, that was just
I know that feeling.
Just kind of marinates. Yeah.
So what are we on? Companion piece pick?
Mm-hmm.
You did Mulholland Drive? Yeah, I don't know. Have I done X-Files before? I don't know if I have.
I feel like you did it recently.
I feel like I might have too. Did I do True Detective before?
God, we reviewed so many games. I'll let you do it if you want to do
it. I don't know. It's like they're all kind of coming from the same like DNA. So
yeah,
I don't know. Like it's either True Detective. Like I had another one here too. Silence of the Lambs, Twin Peaks, what was the other like Pacific Northwest core thing? I forgot. I mean, I'll go with any one of those. I think everybody should watch that stuff anyway. Especially, we've brought it up a lot, Twin Peaks. If you've never seen that, it's amazing. It's absolutely a great television show. The original television show from the 90s. Everybody should try and watch it. It's never been easier to watch. I think it's all on Netflix. So I think you guys could all check it out.
Got a poster in my room.
Hell yeah. Favorite moment? Let's just hit this and wrap it up here.
Herald of Darkness, just that in the studio.
Yeah, that's the concert part. That was really cool.
They performed live at the game announcements, which is pretty cool.
That was sick. Honestly, one of the most unique moments in gaming for me. I really love that part. I also really liked when we first enter Alan's reality. and we go from live action, like a long drawn out live action scene that's done really well, and then shifting over to gameplay. My jaw dropped, and I was like, holy shit, I'm loving this. And again, very early on in the game, probably like the first 2 hours that happens, and it's very cool. So the game still has you by that point for me, and I really, really enjoyed that particular moment. Nitpicks, I think we covered them, right? My only note here is convoluted story for nitpicks. Obviously, we talked about everything else, though.
Yeah. Honestly, we should maybe just get rid of this category because if there are nitpicks, we
yeah,
can talk about
well,
it.
it's a good space. We need it.
It's good to summary. It's good to summarize.
Yeah, I mean, just like usually, I like
there might be nitpicks for good games too.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. Is like that's why we need the category here right now. Usually, if we're kind of mid on a game or kind of like okay on a game, nitpicks doesn't really get used because the whole episode becomes this. I'll tell you a segment that's not really going to work for this one is rename this game. How are you going to name it anything else? I couldn't think of anything.
I had 3.
Okay, oh, you did. Okay, Alan Wake. Not 2. Not Alan Wake 2.
Alan Wake Nightmare Spiral.
Okay.
Alan Wake The Spiral Unravels.
Okay.
Saga Anderson The Loop.
Okay. I dig it. You know, honestly, now that you say that, now that you said the Saga Anderson, it kind of would have been cool if the game was just Saga Anderson.
I thought the same thing when I said it out loud.
Not even just the subtitle, just the game is called Saga Anderson, and it's like it's Alan Wake 2, but it would make sense because you're playing as a different character who's written by Alan Wake. It would have come full circle for sure.
Missed shot.
And our last one, would you play some other games from this developer? Absolutely. We talked about that enough already. Go play Control if you guys haven't already. It is, I personally, I feel like it just is super underrated and people just don't talk about that game enough. I don't know what the hell happened. But people are talking about Alan Wake 2 a lot. People like Remedy.
Same thing with Titanfall 2, man. It's one of those games that just kind of
didn't break through enough.
We'll have to go kind of dig back in and see like what came out during that time, maybe why it fell under the radar. But it's a sick game.
Yeah, absolutely. So okay, I'll wrap up my thoughts right here. Alan Wake 2 is very cool. It's one of the most unique gaming experiences I've had in a long time. I think that the game is pretty behind mechanically when it comes to combat. And just your typical survival horror elements and mechanics and things like that. I personally very much disagree with Game Direction Award, and I think it barely squeezed by with art style just because of the unique take that it has in mixing in a lot of mixed media. If we're going purely on like kind of in-game art style and things like that, I think there's some other heavy hitters that probably could have beat it out. But Alan Wake does have a very, very unique style, which I think pushed it over. And sorry, was that you scoffing? Oh, that was you. Okay. I thought you were scoffing at me. And I was like, Matthew, are we not beyond that? Okay. So that's my final conclusive thoughts of the game. I think everyone should check it out. If you're into this genre, check it out. I think once the Alan Wake TV show comes in like 2-3 years on HBO, it's probably gonna be a really great TV show.
So who are you casting for that? I have my cast for Alan Wake. And unfortunately, just unless he really works on his accent, it would not be
the guy.
The guy.
Yeah.
His name is Ika Vili. Very great look. Very handsome man.
Yeah, he was very handsome.
I would cast Jake Gyllenhaal.
Ooh, that's good. He might be a little too old for the role, though, no?
He looks pretty much 1-to-1, in my opinion, not 1-to-1. He looks very similar when he has his hair long and with a beard to this guy. I think.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great. I would probably do Kieran Culkin.
Oh.
That's a joke. That's a joke.
See, in my mind, here's what happened in my mind when you said that. I had him in my mind. I'm like, no, that can't be right.
Yeah.
And I was like,
well,
who's Kieran Culkin again? I'm like, no, that is Kieran.
Yeah,
Culkin.
Roman.
Yeah.
Roman,
baby.
Roman Roy. Yeah. That sums it up for me. Go for it, Matt.
I'd be willing to cast Kieran Culkin as Alex Casey.
That could work. Although nobody would believe it. People would, it just wouldn't work.
Like, but Anderson, I don't know.
Yeah.
No, it'd be so funny. What are we on? Conclusive thoughts? Ratings. We kind of just gave it. Wait, did you give a rating?
I didn't give my rating yet.
Conclusive thoughts. It's pretty cool. It does a lot of interesting things. I think the gameplay is kind of what holds it back, actually, ultimately. but it takes a lot of really cool risks, I think, with what it tries to do with a story, even though it does fall into like kind of the time loop, time spiral trope, whatever. I still think it's a lot more interesting than a lot of other games that are coming out these days.
Agreed.
Significantly more interesting, and that's even without the mixed media. I think when you pile on the mixed media on top of that, this is one of the more special games to come out, I think, within the past.
Still agree with that.
Year and a half, 2 years.
Yeah. Still agree with that. And you know what the thing
is?
I
kind of wish it was a movie or an HBO show, actually.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying is I think it makes more sense as one of those things.
Directed by Lynch, honestly.
Directed by Lynch, possibly. Yeah.
I'll never do it, but it'd be sick.
I do think Sam Lake could probably direct it, honestly, if he wanted to get into like film and television. I mean, half the game is, live action. Yeah. So I don't think it's a very far leap. Yeah. So yeah, like
what's cool too with him? I found out, I was reading, just kind of going back into his history a bit. The reason he kind of got into acting in their games is because they just literally didn't have the budget to hire actors in their very first Max Payne.
That's great. That is great.
But hard to agree with this is a HBO show or something to be sick.
Yeah.
All right, should we give it our?
Let's go for our ratings. Let's do it.
All right, everyone. On the count of 3, Lucas and I will give our ratings. This will be the TFP rating divided by 2 to get the ultimate rating, which usurps everything else. All right. 1, 2, 3, 8.
Yeah. Solid 8. It's actually below the Metacritic score that is out there right now. The Metacritic score is an 88. The IGN score is 9. The GameSpot score is actually 10. There's actually not a lot of publications out there that have rated this as low as we're rating it.
I'm a little disappointed in that, honestly, because when IGN gave Spider-Man 2 not a bad review, a 7 out of 10, right? Which I think is actually a very fair, very fair review for what it is. I was hoping we'd see something similar from some of the other outlets here, but not really.
Personally, I think that people are glazing Alan Wake 2 a little bit too much. Like, there's so many games. We talked about it in last week's episode, right? Or by the time this comes out, it'll be last week's episode. There were so many amazing games that came out this year, and Alan Wake 2 is very, very good. But like, man, I don't know, like. Looking through like the Game Awards, I don't know, like there was it definitely did not deserve to win Game of the Year. I'm glad it didn't. But like, man, if you're gonna play this, or you have a choice between like this, Baldur's Gate, Tears of the Kingdom, I'd recommend any of those games before this one. So it's being held in like extremely high acclaim. But I think there's probably some games we could have thrown on the best Game of the Year. The Game of the Year nominations and taking Alan Wake 2 off. Just saying.
Yeah, I think there's an argument for that. Yeah, but I'll tell you what, Lucas. Despite us not agreeing with the acclaim, I am glad it got the acclaim because I want to see more from Remedy.
I want to see Control 2. I don't want to see more Alan Wake. I want to see more Control.
Does that have like a tentative?
It's like 2025 or whatever it is. Yeah.
But I hope this inspires other, developers to do interesting stuff and not just do what fucking Insomniac is doing.
Yeah, no, that's one
and
thing.
I'm not hating on Insomniac. What they do very well, and like Spider-Man was a very well done and polished game, and same thing with Santa Monica with God of War. But like, it's not interesting, and we have enough of that. Let's get some more interesting stuff into the game space.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Well said. All right, shall we wrap it up?
Yes, sir. All right, everyone. As always, you can find us online at TFP Podcast. That's at TFP Podcast, and that's the end. That is our Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram handle. Come follow us on Twitch, Thanks for Playing Pod, and on Kick at TFP Podcasts. It is where we are streaming and having a good time. You can look forward to a Kingdom Hearts stream for me. Well, never mind. I'm going to give you tomorrow, but that's not your tomorrow. Forget it. I'm streaming on Tuesdays. Lucas is streaming on Wednesdays. Mickey's on Mondays sometimes, and Chambers on Thursday. Come hang out. It's fun. Join our Discord. You know where to find it. Discord. You know where to find it. And yeah, thanks for playing pod@gmail.com. Shoot us some questions. Let us know if we got it right or wrong on Alan Wake 2. All right, everyone. This has been Thanks for Playing. Catch you next time. Skibbity bop! Thanks for Playing is a production of Good Ideas Only. Your hosts are Lucas Luna and Matt Rockaby. Our music was done by the impeccable Sammy Luna, and our logo design was done by the talented Isaac Palestino. Special thanks to the Roll Call Bunch and Red Circle.